Coming up on this episode of The Roundtable.
There's this technological issue. I mean, basically, Biden is reinforcing the message coming down from the military and from the spy community that Americans should be in a state of slavish dependency on their technological innovation. You know, it's not like it was in the old days where tinkerers and private citizens would sit around trying to solve problems and come up with cool things like the light bulb. Basically, all of the technology that has come to us over the past 20 years, plus under the auspices of technological innovation, that stuff has come from military research and development. And sometimes it's discarded military technology, or they try something that doesn't work, so they bump it down to the private sector. I mean, that is not how America came to be great.
Hello and welcome to The Roundtable, the official weekly podcast of the editors and publisher of The American Mind. It's a skeleton crew. Today we're running our summer fellowships as we speak, which is one of our favorite times of year, but that means that a lot of our guys are out teaching the youth, indoctrinating them into the dark ways of the Claremont Institute and the Red Pill. This is part of our ongoing effort, of course, to countermand other forms of indoctrination that we consider more pernicious, and hopefully we're not actually indoctrinating them so much as educating them on the true meaning of the American founding and the American ideal. In any case, you're stuck with me, as happens when Ryan is out. You're stuck with me as host. I'm Spencer Clavin. I'm the features editor of The American Mind and the associate editor of the Claremont Review of Books. I am joined today by our managing editor, Seth Barron, all the way from New York, and our executive editor, James Poulos, who, out of the sheer dedication to the Roundtable and the American Mind, is live casting from his car. So if you hear people screaming in flames by the side of the road in the background, that's just James driving the California roadways, overtaxed as they are. Well, Tucker Carlson has claimed that the NSA is spying on him. This is a really shocking allegation, except that it sort of fits nicely with a lot of what we've been talking about on The American Mind. It's one of those things that seems extravagant and insane, except also we've been warning about and will continue to warn about the seriously dedicated and quite pernicious attempts on the part of the Biden administration and the Democrats more generally to criminalize right-wing thought, to make it an object of state surveillance, and to weaponize the full apparatus of the state against half of the American people. We're going to be releasing a feature about this very, very shortly. So stay tuned for that and for more commentary on the Biden administration's so-called strategy for countering domestic terrorism. Domestic terrorism meaning essentially anything to the right of BLM. For now, though, here's this claim that Tucker made. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that. He has said, Tucker went on his show with his uncountable number of millions of viewers and said that he had been contacted by a whistleblower and that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. There is a high degree of many people listening to Tucker Carlson find this incredibly plausible, even though it's a developing story. We don't know actually what's going to come out, if anything, if we'll ever get answers here. But of course, the predictable reaction from sites that covered it, you know, CNN, for example, here's the headline. Tucker Carlson claimed the NSA is spying on him. Even his own colleagues don't seem to believe it. So as always, when something like this comes out, the next thing that happens is you are made to feel stupid and insane for even entertaining the idea. Now there's a statement from the NSA itself, which is kind of a remarkable development. They put it out in a screen cap on Twitter, and I'm going to read it in full and then hand it over to the crew to see what they make of it. On June 28th, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been, quote, monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to try to take his program off the air. NSA has a foreign intelligence mission. We target foreign powers to generate insights on foreign activities that could harm the United States. With limited exceptions, e.g. an emergency, NSA may not target a U.S. citizen without a court order that explicitly authorizes the targeting. This has been the subject of much Twitter scrutiny, as you may imagine. People have pointed out, for example, that the one allegation that seems to be untrue is masking over a number of allegations that Carlson made. There's a lot of vagueness in this language, and the caveat that NSA may target a U.S. citizen in an emergency rings particularly hollow when we've just been through over a year of emergency declarations, emergency powers, and emergency interventions into / affronts against our constitutional rights. At this point, guys, I would like to hear from you and what you make of all this. Is Tucker Carlson being spied on?
So this is a FBI whistleblowers, right? Is Tucker's claim is that he's not just making this up. It's not some random person. This is actually coming from people who would know, right? So I mean, Seth's a New Yorker. New Yorkers in the know are aware that links between sort of city officials and intelligence officials can actually be thicker than they might first appear. I mean, as far as we all know, Anthony Weiner's laptop is still in the custody of the FBI field office in New York. The NYPD itself has, my understanding is NYPD has been used in the past as a way of conducting sort of domestic intelligence operations after the Church Committee laid down the law and said, you can't have U.S. agencies sort of spying on their own citizens. There are always workarounds if something is deemed a matter of national security. All kinds of magical doors open, and one of the major problems with the intelligence community as it's currently structured is how it interfaces with the military industrial complex, not just the Pentagon, but also all the consultancies, and the way that since more or less since the creation of the atomic bomb, Gary Wills goes into this in his book Bomb Power very, very patiently, very clearly. Sort of a parallel government was set up, a government within a government, to maintain and protect and deploy America's thermonuclear capability. And to our misfortune, military and the intelligence community have been able to avail themselves of extraordinary powers that do not always have even executive oversight, as we would understand that in a constitutional sense. And so to begin with, this claim is not outlandish at all. And I think, ever since the Snowden revelations and even since the Patriot Act, many Americans have kind of assumed in the back of their head, they're like, well, they're probably just hoovering up everything I say and do anyway. Barack Obama, none less than Barack Obama, said explicitly, if you don't want it to be in the news, don't put it in your email. We've been receiving all kinds of signals. And of course, huge data sets from the federal government that the Chinese have just lifted and walked away with, much to the embarrassment of the feds. So it's clear that that our information is not locked down. The Fed's information is not always locked down. And then to complicate matters still further, we know that since almost the very beginning, the NSA has been freely sharing information and freely receiving information from GCHQ, the British equivalent of the NSA. So, really the intelligence community is an internationalized executive body with very little oversight, almost no guardrails, eating away at constitutional norms, and doing so in times of peace as well as war, blurring the line between peace and war, and basically breaking the rules until they're caught. And so, you can come up with various political justifications for this pattern of behavior, and many do. But the reality is that Tucker's claims are not outlandish, and that if you look at the statement, as many people have already observed on Twitter since the statement dropped, it has been carefully worded. And anyone with two brain cells who knows a thing or two about how intelligence works understands that the statement has been worded in a way that does not formally deny the allegations. A lot of this is reminiscent of the hot water that Sean Spicer got into when he repeated claims made by Judge Napolitano back on his Fox News show during the Trump years, where once again, he had well-placed sources, and the sources said that that in an effort to avoid entangling the U.S. Spy network too deeply, Barack Obama basically went to GCHQ and said, "Hey guys, do me a solid and monitor Trump for me, so that basically our tracks are covered." So Spicer repeated these allegations, and within a matter of hours, I think it was 1 or 2 days, H.R. McMaster, if I'm remembering the story right, basically grabbed Spicy by the ear and dragged him in front of the cameras and said, on behalf of the United States government, we apologize for creating the impression that we thought the kingdom of Great Britain was spying on the president. But the reality is, what is the point of having something like Five Eyes if you can't find ways of monitoring what's going on in your own country? Is how a sort of hard-nosed spy master would probably phrase the problem. If you have this globe-straddling intelligence network, if you find yourself in a situation security-wise where you feel like you need that globe-straddling security network, then it would be almost an insult to the whole concept of a powerful global intelligence network if the member states couldn't actually put a spotlight on dangerous activity going on within their country. It's all very logical. Of course, the one problem is it constitutional? Is it consistent with our form of government? Do we live in a regime where liberty is secure and where natural rights are protected if our intelligence community can operate with impunity and can internationalize itself and is full of people who can never be removed from office, people who are completely opaque to the American people? Voters don't even know who these folks are. Is that America anymore? Regardless of what the logic of robust spycraft would tell you to do. So this isn't going away. And back in the day, it used to be more folks on the left who were appalled by the idea of a military-industrial complex and a security state gone wild, unaccountable. Steve Saylor said, the Cold War was really a war for control of the global left. I think there's more than some cheeky wisdom in that. I think that what we're seeing right now is sort of a digital war right now for control of the global left. And so I think that, from the beginning, a lot of these unelected guys burrowed deep in the halls of power have been looking for ways to reconcile, to bring together the problem of America and the problem of the world as they see it. And the magic key for them was something that would allow them to sort of take control of the American left and the global left at the same time. And, what a coincidence that wokeness, we can talk about this later, is something that is being, slobbered on by the Joint Chiefs, by the intelligence community. It all lines up very nicely. And I think, Americans, regardless of their partisan affiliation, can't ignore this fact anymore. And many of them are waking up to it.
Yeah, I agree with everything James said, basically. Regarding the NSA's statement, I mean, just two things stick out. One where they say, oh, well, we don't investigate U.S. citizens, we investigate foreign powers. Well, as we saw under Trump, like the intelligence community, as it were, has all kinds of, loopholes to that designation. I mean, essentially, Tucker Carlson's already been accused of operating as a foreign agent. So any tenuous association you can make between an individual and a foreign citizen essentially makes them, brings them into the web of investigation. Also, the idea that, I believe the statement said, well, we can't do it unless a court authorizes it. Well, we already saw that the FISA court will authorize anything based on the most, transparent premises. So, look, whether the NSA is spying on, I would be surprised if they weren't, basically, but it certainly doesn't seem like it's preposterous. I think it's amusing that the rest of the media is rushing to, tinfoil hat Tucker, imply that he's some kind of paranoid conspiracist lunatic, that his entire show and public image is based on him spouting nonsense because of that libel case where that defense was used, that they that reasonable people don't take all of his statements at face value, which just means that yes, he exaggerates at times because it's an opinion show. It's the same argument that the New York Times uses and that Rachel Maddow uses. So obviously they want to marginalize him and paint him as a lunatic. And this, they'll just feed this into that. The other thing I think is great is this idea. I mean, as long as I can remember, the left, like the Oliver Stone left, the Mark Lane left, the Noam Chomsky left, the Jane Fonda left, the Ed Asner left, has despised the FBI and the CIA. They've always stood against them. They've always said that this is like a huge danger, this unelected intelligence behemoth that exercises all this control, that assassinates democratic presidents, that undermines, Black liberation. And to see all of a sudden that they adore them, that they talk about the intelligence community and put former CIA agents on television just gushing over them. I mean, it's kind of similar to the way in which, until very recently, like, I don't know, it seems like yesterday, Democrats and the left generally were against money in politics. I mean, wasn't this a big thing for a long time?
Yes, I recall this. And I think it's part of what you're describing, Seth, is part of a couple trends generally that we can take beyond this individual episode, right? I mean, one of them is the just absolute fawning adoration of power and authority all of a sudden, right? I mean, the left used to bill itself as the rebel gang of, unwashed hippies that could rush into the street and take down Big Brother. Now you have like Elizabeth Warren, dreaming of a day when sniveling little peasants can't heckle sitting senators. My goodness, sitting senators on Twitter, right? This is something she actually said, which betokens an attitude, not only is a fundamentally anti-American attitude, but just a general sense, right, that if you hold a high office in this country, assuming that you have the right opinions, then your virtue, your ascension above the common man is unassailable. And so, I mean, that is a kind of classic move of people who have guilty consciences, not to psychoanalyze my enemies. But the other thing that you're both, I think, identifying, right, is this kind of new rhetorical move that's just dropped as the left goes crazier and crazier. And maybe it's not really all that new so much as more brazen. And that is that they do things that are, in fact, outlandish, that you would never, ever have thought could ever have occurred in America. I mean, somebody said in the various Twitter commentary, this is for all the talk of literally fascism, right? This is literally fascism for the NSA to be spying on a private citizen. And yet, as I mentioned at the beginning, right, we can all believe that it's going on. Why? Because the language that's coming out of the Biden administration and this domestic terrorism strategy and in a number of other statements that they've made, basically pursuant upon January 6th, using January 6th as this Reichstag fire to clamp down the government power on really everyone that they dislike, right? That language has been so nakedly authoritarian, so sinister, so profoundly ominous that we all, and in addition, those of us who are familiar with the history that James just outlined, right, we all know that they're perfectly capable of and willing to do this. The model for it already exists in the military, where because they can't technically spy on private citizens, they outsource this stuff to to private firms. I think they're looking right now at a firm called Babel Street to surveil, to cleanse the military ideologically and to surveil social media posts and get all of this data and figure. So, there are a million different ways that the NSA could be doing this without officially doing it. The wording of that statement, as you both identify, makes clear that there is a veritable iceberg of caveats underneath it. It's a little bit murky and unclear, at least to me, which caveats they are or should be. Is it that we the NSA spy only on foreign agencies, but we certainly take a great interest in these other private firms that we just happen to have, deputized to do this? Or is it that, as Seth, you're indicating, we've basically identified Tucker Carlson as a foreign agency, as a foreign enemy for, however ridiculously we may have done this. All of this position is in place, but the rhetorical move is that you do these extravagant, insane things, and then when people express suspicions about that, you say, well, that's that could never happen. That's just an outlandish conspiracy theory. I mean, and the right is, has its own dupes for this. I think we have on our side people who will say, well, that's just a tinfoil hat sort of theory. Except that, of course, it's happening right in the open. And if you identify it, it's the classic celebration parallax, a la Michael Anton, right? That if you're the one talking about it, then you're evil and wrong. But if somebody, who believes in it talks about it, then it's great and wonderful. Yes, it's happening. No, it's not happening. You're evil for talking about it. In any case, it's an intriguing new development in the kind of conspiracy theory world where we live, that now to be a conspiracy theorist is this low status thing, except that there are actual conspiracies going on, which to identify makes you sound like you're wearing a tinfoil hat, which is, you have to admire the rhetorical economy of that in some way, even though it's incredibly sinister.
Yeah, I've been looking for not just instances of the celebration parallax to log in my mind, but for trying to find the steelmen of the celebration parallaxes. And from what I can tell, when it comes to the convergence of wokeness and militarism or technocracy, the strongest version of that kind of argument that I can glean from the discourse, such as it is, goes something like this. Of course, there's no conspiracy by unelected internationalized bureaucrats to change our form of government against the will of the people. And also, if we don't do this, we'll lose to China. I think really, if you really sort of cornered some of these people and tried to get them to give their best faith account of why what they're doing is right, warts and all, in the same way that, the Bushies during the global war on terror, before the domestic war on terror had been invented, said basically look, it sucks, but we have to cross over into the dark side and we have to remain there until further notice, because, we just can't have more planes crashing into more buildings. We can't have Americans living in terror. We can't lose the, third or fourth or fifth World War, whatever it is we're on now. I think if you cornered, some of these Joint Chiefs guys or whoever, Raytheon executives, hoisting the pride flag, they would basically say something like, well, we tried to encourage China's peaceful rise so that we wouldn't get in trouble down the road. And, well, nobody's perfect. And that's probably why we need to create machines that can rule us. But the long story short is, China has risen peacefully and is now a global adversary. And they're about to have breakout advances in technology that surpass even our own. And, our guys have warned for decades that we needed some kind of national service program because young Americans were increasingly alienated from their country and didn't feel that patriotic and weren't willing to serve and had no sense of sort of communal or collective loyalty, no solidarity. And well, wokeness is going to be that now. We're just going to hoist that flag. And without that social glue, we're not going to be able to get Americans organized behind the goal of confronting China, taking them on, making sure they don't dominate the world, and really ultimately making Chinese people realize that life is more awesome when you can sort of have total sexual freedom, and you don't even have to be attractive in order to have it, and we'll deliver the goods better for you than the CPC leadership. That's probably, I think, what they would say. And, unfortunately on the right, the viewpoint diversity when it comes to China seems to be growing and growing, not in a particularly healthy way. Although, I think that we do need to have a sort of more sophisticated discussion about how to deal with China and what can and can't and shouldn't be done. The right is so divided on these Chinese questions that it's really hurting our ability to, I think, adequately capture why the left today is so slavishly devoted to technocratic power and is blunting our ability to advance, a rival grand strategy that really makes sense to Americans as well as, earns their loyalty.
James, how do they figure out a way to make unattractive people have sex?
Well, I mean, look at San Francisco, peeking through your fingers if need be. But basically the idea
I was just kidding. I was just kidding.
Well, yeah, I mean, I will say though that like the old view, like the pre-digital view, was that if you were hot enough, you kind of had the golden ticket to be a complete libertine. That was what Hollywood was preaching, and what Silicon Valley has brought in sort of over the top and really at this point kind of broken the mystique of the Hollywood ideology of sex is like, well, really, technology is what is going to unlock the doors of sexual paradise for you, and that's your golden ticket. If you are willing to embrace the cyborg lifestyle in some form or another, then that's kind of the site or the location where sexual utopia can come in.
Yeah, they're very against sexual attraction of any sort of natural kind. This is one of the intriguing ironies to me of the whole alphabet people part of everything, right, is that you're supposed to deprogram yourself. And this is, I presume, so that you can become a widget in the enormous digital machine that James is foretelling, right? It's just, you're not supposed to have a reaction, a sexual response to a certain gender. That's genital preference. You're not supposed to find fat people unattractive. That's fat phobia. And all of this presumably has been instilled in you a la a kind of Rousseauian blank slate. It's been instilled in you by these evil power structures that have turned you into a terrible tool, even an unwitting tool. I mean, maybe you may be a very good leftist, but by liking skinny women or women at all, you are a tool, a pawn of the patriarchy and of systemic racism. So I'd actually like to talk about that in a distant sort of way. I'd like to talk about this form of thought making its thoroughgoing way into the military, which really seems to be a testing ground for a lot of this stuff. I mean, I talked about the sort of surveillance technique of outsourcing spying to private companies. That seems to be tested out in the military, and then as a mode of just taking over an entire institution, probably in part because it was originally devoted to so many kind of masculinist and traditional values, but also, I suppose, since it is inevitably going to be the nexus of power in any regime, the military has been a serious target of woke ideology. And the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman, Mark Milley, this is a general, sat down on Wednesday, so really last week, I guess, and was asked about the January 6th unrest. He says, I do think it's important actually for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read, and it is important that we train and we understand. I want to understand white rage, and I'm white. These are talking points prepared for the Joint Chiefs Chairman by any number of just formerly unhinged ideologues. I say formerly because now these are the people that kind of run the country, but we've done some writing about this at the American Mind, especially on our Substack. You can find James's latest on this there at americanmind.substack.com. Ryan has written a little bit about wokeness as our major cultural export on pain of death. But it is striking to me that this has become a kind of test case for techniques of institutional capture that will then, a couple months down the line, be rolled out more generally and more widely. Perhaps again because this is an institution that's well within the government's control, but perhaps also because it's a hinge institution. In any case, do you guys experience any white rage at the announcement of the Joint Chiefs Chairman?
I'm experiencing white rage because apparently Bill Cosby was just released from prison.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, and his charges were dismissed, I guess, with prejudice, so he can't be prosecuted any further. That actually doesn't really bother. I mean, well, it does bother me, but I'm not going to say that I'm feeling white rage about it. What I think about is funny about the general's comments is that he said, like, I want to understand what happened, and that's why we need to study white rage. So that means he's not interested. He knows what happened. He knows that it was he already has his answer. That white rage informed the January 6th protest, riot, melee, whatever. I think it's very clever how they have just shifted the entire terms of the discussion of the January 6th thing into white nationalism, when there's really no evidence that there was anything white nationalist about it at all, except that most of the people there were white. But I think in our system of looking at motivation, we're not supposed to just assume that if a bunch of people of one race are doing something that it's a manifestation of racial consciousness and racial solidarity and racial hatred. I thought that was the way we do it, but yeah, this white rage thing is really something. I mean, I've noticed, like on Twitter, I get this a lot. Like anytime I say anything, even just silly or just a comment, the go-to response is, "Why are you so angry? Why do you have so much rage?" I see Tucker Carlson gets this a lot too. This assumption, I guess it's just pure projection, because the people who seem to have the rage obviously are on the other side.
Yeah, I think this is a huge point. I mean, one thing that Milley could have said was, I want to understand what happened, like over last summer. Obviously, it was a big deal, whether you're counting the damage in billions or whatever your measurement is. I want to understand it, so I want to read about Black rage. I got to figure this out. And I think like sure, of course there's Black rage. Like many things that have been done ostensibly with the interests of Black America at heart have not gone particularly well. In some cases, like the ostensible cure has been worse than the disease, and like all Americans, Black males are finding themselves in a society where masculinity is actively despised, and where outlets for masculinity are fought against tooth and nail. Oh, don't be a priest, you're a child molester. Oh no, don't be a warfighter, you're killing brown people. Oh nope, can't be a father, that's patriarchy. You can go, can't be a businessman, that's greed, that's capitalism. We have to, so everywhere you turn, it's smash the men. And and Black men have suffered for that, as much as anyone. And so rather than expressing that kind of interest, because the answer to that, the puzzle of Black rage, oh, why is this happening? Oh, well, it's because of whiteness. That's the explanation. Let's not look for other reasons. We're going to blame it all on whiteness. And so then the epistemological crisis is, oh, we must understand why whiteness is so evil. It must be white rage, but it's also white fragility. So, so the attack is whiteness embodies not just rage, but also fragility. And this is coming from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Now, what would have been interesting is two alternatives, right? One alternative could be, well, I'm interested in learning about Protestant fragility because, if you look at what happened to mainline Protestantism over the past 50 years, it's really fallen apart. Now we have all these crazy ex-Protestants running around screaming in people's faces how they need to wear their mask and about how they're being triggered and psychological trauma is being done to them because someone's exercising their free speech. What's going on with all these fragile, raging ex-Protestants? Maybe we should investigate like what's going on theologically that is bringing this about. That would have been an interesting discussion, not on the table. Another interesting discussion would have been, well, wait a minute, all of these accusations being leveled against Whitey, those could be leveled against the military-industrial complex itself. Once the atomic bomb is invented, the military is in having an identity crisis. Oh my gosh, suddenly all the budget is going to the nuclear program. The army budget dropped down, from a big majority to about 22% back in the 40s, late 40s. And since then, the only thing that the military has had to kind of convince itself that it isn't redundant and should still exist is basically an infinite blank check for research and development, which they've been using, however consciously, to try to come up with a weapon system that is more powerful than the bomb, but also more usable than the bomb. And really, if you look at all that R&D, what it ended up going into is computer technology and digital technology that is much more usable than the bomb because it can be deployed for psychological operations at home and abroad. And that's exactly what we've got now. And so, you look at the context between the intelligence community and the big social media platforms. You look at, the infinite budget that the Pentagon has and all of its subcontractors. And what you see is, a military that has felt very fragile after, the president of the United States had sole discretionary power to blow up the entire planet with the flip of a switch. Very fragile, very hurt ego. And, and not only fell on its face during Vietnam, but fell on its face even more so during the late lamented global war on terror. Finding out that, wow, a secular crusade against a bunch of jihadis, holy warriors, doesn't really work. Even if you had all the budgets in the world. So this huge pivot from, a sort of invade the budget, the bigger the bombs, pivot one war that we can win using the weapons at our disposal. It's basically psychological war against the domestic population. That seems to me to reflect just as well the dynamic between fragility and rage as anything. And of course, Milley doesn't want to have that conversation.
You could talk on top of everything about Milley's own fragility, since he began his statements by saying, I personally find it offensive that we are accusing the United States military, our general officers, our non-commissioned officers, of being, quote, woke. I mean, I think that the absolute, in addition to everything, James, you've very eloquently outlined, right? The absolute cratering of elite credibility and the total slippage out from underneath them of any firm ground to stand upon to justify their ever increasing power over our lives, besides just their naked will to retain that power and the white knuckled grip they seem determined to hold on it, right? That has developed a great deal of elite fragility, wherein the mere claim to a title, the mere claim to occupying a position in American life, which once was a position of honor, is thought to be enough to protect you against a litany of a just grim litany of failures and disastrous spite, just pure indifference and arrogance, and a year's worth at least of open disdain for and destruction of the American people. There's an article, an essay really at Tablet called "The War on Reality," and it's just a resume of disasters incurred by hard-headed and thoroughly dedicated anti-reality leadership on the part of COVID, right? People just destroying the country. There's no less blunt way to say it, right? People destroying the country on the basis of no evidence, often in the face of readily available evidence that people were perfectly able to see online, but were demonized for looking at and talking about. And the terrible disasters wrought just in that one area by people who occupy positions of power and authority and prestige. And so then, they get up on their stages and their daises and they say, I personally find it offensive. I'm offended. So that's fragility and rage for you right there in one sentence. I'm offended that you would accuse somebody in my position, holding this role of authority. You would accuse me of being, quote, woke. How dare you even think of such a thing, right? Now let me talk about white rage. This is like all of this stuff, of course, it comes along with a certain degree of just daring you to object, daring you to respond, right? Because the implication of that assertion is I'm in power, you're not. And how dare you even suggest that I'm not using that power well or for the best interest of the American people? It is, I mean, it's profoundly sickening. Also, at this point, I suppose we should be used to it, since it goes all the way up to the very height, the very top of the executive branch, among other places. We wanted to reserve a little bit of time today to chat about our president. It's hard to know where to begin. At this point, as Dave Rubin likes to joke, the scandal is the non-scandal. The scandal is that we have a person in the highest office in the land out here saying and doing things that would make even a remedially educated child embarrassed. Recently, we have a couple good ones. There was Biden's speculation that the Latinx population, or as Ryan likes to say, the Latinx population, isn't getting vaccinated because they're afraid of being deported, because, of course, as we know, all Latinx people are illegal immigrants, and also something the Tuskegee Airmen. But this one is, I guess, about black people, that black people are afraid of being experimented on. So, I mean, they create, of course, this story that reduces every dynamic, the many complex dynamics of decline and dysfunction that James elucidated earlier, right? Reduces all of this to pure racial grievance, racial consciousness, racial history. The only reason that black people could be suspicious about vaccines is that the Tuskegee Airmen were experimented on, and others, says Biden. So this is a remarkable set of statements to be coming out of the White House, out of a White House which claims not only to be a kind of a Pacific break from the disasters of the last 4 years, but also is asking for an astonishing wish list of power over the American people. Does anybody have control over this? You guys, is this a person that is genuine, just a sort of, batty, senile, woke-addled old man just kind of running rampant in the White House? Or is there something more structured and intentional going on here in these disastrous press conferences?
I think regarding statements like that, it's just senility on parade. I think it's interesting that, and this comes back to the whole white rage, black rage, or white rage, black joy. We hear that a lot too, black joy. I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase. It's fun to Google. This idea, well, there's two kinds of anti-vaxxers. There's white Trumpists who are just like befuddled idiots who don't understand science. And then there's reasonable people on the other side who have justifiable concerns. The idea that Biden confused the Tuskegee Airmen, like the sharecroppers associated with the Tuskegee Institute, whose syphilis went untreated. The idea that he made this mistake and that it was completely ignored, complete silence about it, and this remark about Latinx that they're all terrified of being deported. I mean, forget about what the reaction would have been if Trump had said this. The fact is, like, just out of curiosity, I put on my Twitter. Now, I don't have that many followers, but most of them are pretty right wing. I said, are you aware of Biden's recent comments about the Tuskegee Airmen? And only 1/3 of people who responded had even heard of it. So this isn't nobody is conscious of what's going on. You're right. The scandal is the non-scandal. And I think if Biden's handlers were in better control of the garbage that comes out of his mouth, then it would have had to have been planned. I mean, they would have been in control of the narrative, but they clearly aren't, so they have to just squash it. I mean, I find it like it's just so comic and so terrifying at the same time that, I mean, it just seems to, it's like if, I don't know, Brezhnev was allowed, when he was totally senile, just to say whatever the hell he wanted, and they wouldn't even report it. But at least then I mean, any intelligent person knew that what was being published in Pravda was just nonsense. Nowadays, like, all the intelligent people seem to think that things are going very well, and that Biden, maybe he gets a little tired sometimes, or he has, they came up with this story that he suffers from a stammer, and that to make fun of the way he has these lapses in logic, or just falls silent, or comes out with like egg salad logic, that it's ableist somehow to make fun of someone with a stammer, when I don't think that's really what the problem is. It's terrifying.
So one comment that Biden made, which did receive some press attention during this time span we're talking about, was his remark that, basically these fools out there in Rube country who think that they can protect their liberties by actually, bearing arms. Like, these imbeciles, no, you actually need nuclear weapons if you want to take on the United States of America. What he didn't say is, you need your own NSA, you need your own special relationship with, GCHQ. He didn't say that. But the way it was presented with, the troll face and the customary smugness was repugnant in its own right. Of course, gun advocates got bent out of shape by this, as well they should. But above and beyond the question of guns, which they are necessary for protecting our liberties, but may not be sufficient. There's this technological issue. I mean, basically, Biden is reinforcing the message coming down from the military and from the spy community that Americans should be in a state of slavish dependency on their technological innovation. It's not like it was in the old days where tinkerers and private citizens would sit around trying to solve problems and come up with cool things like the light bulb. Basically, all of the technology that has come to us over the past 20 years, plus under the auspices of technological innovation, that stuff, David Goldman has been, very good about laying this out. That stuff has come from military research and development. Sometimes it's discarded military technology, or they try something that doesn't work, so they bump it down to the private sector. I mean, that is not how America came to be great. And judging by the ways that these technologies have been deployed, it's not the way that America is going to recover its greatness. We need a Second Amendment for certain kinds of technology. If Americans can't themselves be innovators, then we're all going to be as slavish with regard to power as these poor souls on the left who have been completely sort of brainwormed into thinking that they need to lick the boots of their former nemesis in the country.
Yeah, that Biden speech about guns was really a kind of it was an apogee of all the trends we've been talking about. It was incoherent, it was rambling, it was aggressive, it was snide. And one of the lines that I loved was, "We're not changing the Constitution, we're enforcing it." Right? This idea that we're actually fortifying America by morphing it into a monoparty surveillance state. This was like when the election became such an enormous boondoggle, and when the 600 plus court cases that Democrats had fought to interfere with normal voting process using COVID as pretext led to a complete snafu when it came to counting votes, and total chaos and anarchy and unknowing about what was going on in some of these counties and states. Well, then, we were treated to statements about how what had happened was that election integrity had been fortified. It had been fortified in the months leading up to November of 2020. Now, I'm sure Seth is way better informed about this than I am. The mayoral election in New York City is undergoing almost an identical process. I mean, it's shocking to me just how sort of brazenly similar it is. 135,000 votes were just sort of found to have been mistakes. It was just a test or something, so they have to erase them and start again, but it's taking forever. And all of this is fortification, right? Well, fortification of what exactly? Fortification of an America in which this elite ruling class will never, ever be challenged again. I mean, they are so terrified by. And this is why Trump remains the great specter, right? Not because of who Trump was or what Trump did, because of what he represents. He represents the fact that people simply stood up and said they would rather spit in the eye of the Bush, Obama, Clinton glob and of the sort of cratering of the middle class and of the exporting of jobs overseas, all of this stuff. They would simply rather spit in the eye of that than acquiesce and go gently into that good night. To me, one of the most chilling factors of all of this, and one of the reasons why we keep harping on a lot of this stuff, is simply that a lot of it is designed to produce complacency, right? A lot of it is designed to get us used to a situation in which the president stands up and says absolutely gobsmackingly ridiculous, incoherent, stupid things that imply a degree of totalitarianism, tech-fueled totalitarianism, which no American should ever accept, right? And then all the conservatives get mad and angry, and all the liberal outlets kind of like plaster it aggressively over their feeds, and then nothing happens, and everything is kind of normal, right? I mean, if you get up most places in America right now, there's just this frog in a pot kind of, well, this is just my life now. I just wear my mask because of the Delta variant, and I just do like listen to what comes out of Biden's mouth, and maybe I don't like it very much, but geez, there's not terribly so much that I can do about it. I mean, I think there is an incredible amount of the incredible effort being devoted to making it look as if this doddering buffoon who wants to take your guns away is actually just a return to normal. We're just back to normal. This is just kind of how things are. And so almost to some extent, we talk about this on this show all the time. It seems as if putting words to it and saying out loud what people are kind of maybe thinking in private is one of the most important things to do at the moment.
If the 2020 election was completely secure and was in fact the best election ever and the most rigorously transparent and locked down election, then why doesn't Trump get more credit for having fortified the whole system against Russian interference? I mean, in 2016, the Russians totally screwed up our entire system and allowed Trump to get in, through Facebook ads and all kinds of machinations. But then after Trump came in, he managed to lock everything down. And so the 2020 election was like perfect. That's what they say. So, I mean, it follows that he should get some credit.
I have a very low view of people's ability to experience cognitive dissonance, and the way that they define people in and out of these categories at will to suit their pleasure and their political aims just suggests to me that like they'll, make Bill Cosby into a hero and Brandon Tatum into a white supremacist. They'll just, decide that Peter Thiel's not gay, and they'll decide that you're not gay. But eventually it'll be like, you're only really black person if you're vaccinated, right? It'll be like you only actually count in any of these categories if you've gotten the vaccine, you're still wearing your mask indoors, and also you voted for Joe Biden. He said, which is what he said when he was running, right? If you ain't voting for me, you ain't black. I don't know. I guess I feel like these narratives don't have to triumph over each other in their perspective scheme, because their coexistence and the tension between them is sort of the point. We are running out of time, so although we could sit here and dredge up cursed Biden content forever, unfortunately we cannot. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, gentlemen. Thank you for hopping on, and thank you all for listening to the Roundtable. If you want to support our work, visit claremont.org/donate. Please do consider doing so. It's a great time for it. And if you want to learn more about all our projects and writing, visit our websites at americanmind.org, claremont.org, claremontreviewofbooks.com, and our brand new Washington, D.C. based Center for the American Way of Life at dc.claremont.org. I will add, as I always do, that we have a Substack, and you should check it out. It's called The American Mindset at americanmind.substack.com. It's where we bring a lot of our quirkiest and most red pill takes, so you won't want to miss it. Also, please do rate, share, and subscribe at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. A 5-star review on Apple does an enormous amount to help us climb the ranks, spread the word, and get this message out, which we hope you will agree is something that needs doing. Thanks to the production and engineering crew, Jake Gannon and Annalisa Lee, and thanks to you all for listening. We will talk to you next week.